All right, well, I'll just raise my voice. Good evening, everyone. Councillors, the gallery. We have had some technical issues. Our apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
If you shout.
Now I'm yelling.
Yep.
So I just said that there are some issues with the technical equipment and the Wi-Fi. We have no what has gone wrong, and we'll very best to get through the meeting in 5 minutes with our voices. So my acknowledgement to the country, the city of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connections to the land, waters, and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. The disclaimer for tonight. Terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery. Members of the public are advised to read them prior to attending this meeting. Attendance and apologies. So again, under attendance and apologies, the Mayor David Lucas is apology tonight. He's currently in Parliament, Parliament House, attending a meeting with politicians. We also have an apology from Councillor Godolphin tonight, who has some family matters she's attending to. Declarations of financial and proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality. Councillor Johnson has declared an indirect financial interest in item C3.1 investment in city-owned land, lots 4 and 5 King Street and lot 75, number 70, 217, 6, lot 72, 71, number 74 and 9300, number 76 Morrison Road, and lot 82, 28. Portion of lots lot 72 and number 20 of 9298. Number 18, Junction Parade Midland, as his daughter is employed by the buyer. The Vandal Inn declared.
So, I'm just going to
I make a recommendation to simply note the incorrect financial and the impartiality, given the nature of it, could be read by Councillor Johnson at the appropriate time during the course of the meeting, noting the real confidentiality associated with it.
I'd like to read it out at this point, right, slightly so I know what I'm going to So, as the presiding member said, we should give those section 5.61 financial interest in matter C3.1, etc. etc. But the reason my daughter has casual employment for 1 or 2 days a week is a checkout salesperson after the property in question. The property purchases will be above land. My daughter lives at home. Being my daughter's sponsor on her employment and a lack of involvement in our transaction, maybe it unlikely to affect her earnings. It is not reasonable to expect that my daughter, that my involvement in this decision will result in a gain, loss, benefit, or detriment to either me or my daughter. So that's my declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and you're correct, it is with the voting. Can you hear me? I don't think so.
Nope.
No? Okay. Well, sorry, but we're going to have to just move on because I can't talk about what's happening with the technical problems.
The system is due for replacement. The tender has been awarded. The replacement actually will happen at the end of June. But whilst we're still waiting for those new equipment to be installed, we are going to have with equipment like this. I'm sure some ongoing issues.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'll continue. Mr. Vanderlyn declared an impartiality interest in item 4.1. The responsible authority report proposed driving range on golf course lot 1003 with Drive lines DA 6-22 as he plays golf on a social basis at the mines. Are there any other declarations, Mr. CEO?
Mr. Chair, none received today.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm declaring an interest council meeting in item 4.1, proposed driving range for the mines. I think it's important to explain what that is. Mr. Deputy Mayor, we suggested I have what's called an apprehended bias on this issue. After all, I was the previous chair of the Mines Residents Association that was formed to fight against development, and I was a highly visible and outspoken critic of the proposal at many meetings that hundreds of Mines residents attended, many of you tonight, and I still am. Council may be of the view that this is not or should not exclude me from participating, but it will do. And the Supreme Court decision of Dame Ferrari Limited versus Showcase Road provides that precedent. The court held where it would be reasonable for a fair-minded lay observer to apprehend that a council member, being me, was so committed to a particular outcome that they were incapable of changing their minds, whatever arguments or evidence was presented, and were not willing to give genuine and appropriate consideration to new materials or submissions. The decision of council could be challenged. Although it would be incorrect, my previous position involved in comments could be enough for a fair-minded lay observer to accuse me of apprehended bias. Therefore, if I was to participate in the decision at the council meeting next week, this would be sufficient to invalidate the council's decision. Even if the vote was 15-0, and therefore my vote was not a determining factor, there is judicial support that the decision of council may be held unlawful as a result of being tainted by the apprehended bias of me. And it's not just the exposure of the council's decision to a legal challenge, there's also the broader government perspective of the public's confidence in the integrity of this council's decision making. So I will be quiet tonight, but additionally, my son now is picking up 1 shift a week as defined, so therefore I also have an indirect financial interest.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I said to Councillor Johnson that it's your declaration, not mine. I'm going to get his hand in that document, please. James, CEO, are there any others? I'm not seeing any others, and we move on to number 5. Public question time, questions relating to the reports contained in the agenda. We received a number of questions from Julia Church, which have been answered in the live document and at the door. A number of questions from Brian Calendar as well, with the answers, and Dixon Lowe, similarly, and Dr. Judith Hindley and Conrad Hunt. All those questions are in the white paper door. All the questions are there as well. And should anybody outside, if we are broadcasting all of these questions and answers, will go available on the city's website tomorrow. So, is there any member of the public wish to ask a question on the item in the agenda? Any member of the public wishes to ask a question on an item in the agenda? No, thank you. 6, reports and notice of motion. Additional information provided on 6.1 in the white folder. You need to read it out. This relates to a couple of issues. We'll go to 6.2 then. 6.2, deputation. In accordance with the current procedures for public participation at a written forum, all requests for in-person deputation were required by 10 a.m. Wednesday, 5th of April 2023. All written deputations, All written deputation was received by 3 p.m. Tuesday, the 4th of April 2023, and circulated with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. So we'll move to part B, so the deputation. I'm going to remind those who are coming to the microphone, you'll need to speak louder because the microphone is not working, so I won't be asking you to press any buttons because it's not going to do any good. So we have 3 in-person deputations. The first one is the Honourable Lorna Harper MLC, and not in support of the author recommendation. So the Honourable Lorna Harper MLC come forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I offer this deputation in conjunction with Jessica Shaw, MLA, member for Swan Hills, who apologises for being unable to attend this meeting, but who has been working with her constituents over the past 2 years on this matter. We wish to raise strong objections to this application for a 2-storey driving range at the Vines Resort and Country Club. An objection which reflects the fervent opposition expressed by an overwhelming number of ratepayers living in the Vines. Parties in favour of this development will encourage the city to consider this matter on extremely narrow grounds. They portray the application as simply a proposal to build a driving range on a golf course. While it may be convenient to view this application on narrow grounds, this limited approach would fundamentally fail our community. We believe this application is the thin end of the wedge, just the beginning of a much larger and totally unsuitable development that will harm the entire area of the Vines. Swan councillors and staff would undoubtedly be aware of the community outrage directed at the new vision for the redevelopment of the Vines released by the Country Club in June 2021. On the public information issued by the Country Club management to the community, the new vision will incorporate construction of this new driving range development, substantial modifications to the current 18-hole championship course, construction of an over 55s lifestyle village on the site of the current driving range, and a new housing development on the back 9 holes of the current Ellenbrook course. There have been scores of public meetings, media coverage and direct representations addressed to the city, as well as an extensive social media commentary in stark opposition to this proposal. Other speakers will address the unsuitability of this driving range proposal on its own merits, as Jessica has also done in her written submission. Objectors highlight detrimental environmental impacts and the negative effects on adjoining properties and local immunity. Proposal DA6/23 warrants rejection in its own right. However, councillors must recognise the much larger story at play. To any objective observer, it is abundantly clear that this application only makes sense as part of a much bigger development project. Approving this application will pave the way for much greater harm. The proponents' intentions to undertake an incremental development strategy are clear and have been consistently and unequivocally communicated to the community from day one. Part 10.2 B of the City of Swan's Local Planning Scheme 17, Procedure for Dealing with Applications states, the local government, in considering an application for planning approval, is to have due regard to any other planning consideration the local government considers relevant. It is apparent that the new vision is of the utmost relevance and as such should be front and centre in the Council's consideration of this proposal. The community who wholly rejects the new vision and have expressed concerns about bushfire safety, particularly access and egress in the event of an emergency, environmental impacts, including on fauna, flora and waterways, the capacity of road and community infrastructure to accommodate additional residencies, effects on the amenity and the value of homes adjoining the golf course and throughout the local area, whether the proposal keeps faith with representations made when residents bought their homes, reduced green space and obstruction of views, access to the resort for existing members and the local community, future future conditions and costs of membership, and the resort's existing condition, previous investment, and whether the vision will lead to facility improvements and upgrades. Whether taken separately or as part of the new vision, this proposal was wholly inappropriate and should be rejected outright. DA 623 signals the beginning of a much larger development, one which the local community vehemently opposes and that would destroy the very essence and the character of the Vines. We urge the council to stand up, support the people of the Vines and reject this application. And I can say, as well as a ratepayer and a resident in the City of Swan and out in that area, I wholly support this 100%. Please reject this.
Hear, hear.
Council? Representing the Vines, the Right Path Association.
I have a copy of my invitation, which, councillor, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present a deputation as an environmental consultant for the Vines Residency Ratepayers Association. I've practiced professionally for nearly 30 years all over WA in a wide range of fields, including environmental impact assessment, native vegetation management, forensic botany, and botanical research. Tonight I'll be speaking against the City of Swan's recommendation, mainly because I consider that both the City and the proponent have failed to carry out the basic due diligence environmental investigations that they're required to complete under environmental legislation in this state and the Commonwealth legislation. In my assessment, I found the Vines to be an extremely valuable environmental area. I did a detailed survey. I won't have time to tell you about everything, but also consider the fact that the Vines also provides ecosystem services to the rest of the City of Swan in adjacent to the Vines with regard to temperature control and carbon capture and abatement. And the City of Swan is now, unfortunately, one of the most poor tree canopy LGAs in Australia. So you need the trees and the vines. I was also surprised that the City of Swan did not include the environmental legislation. They listed the planning legislation, but there was no mention of the environmental legislation that pertains to this case. And I think it's really important that the councils understand that it does pertain to this case and that there are large penalties associated with not heeding the legislation. Also, the term referral used by the recommendation is inappropriate because referral is a technical term. A referral to the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation is a technical term asking for the EPA to assess a project, whereas the city has not done so. Similarly, the development proponent's environmental consultant, Coterra, also made major omissions and factual errors about basic issues. There was, in my opinion, insufficient expertise and effort applied, and thus Coterra did not meet even the basic EPA requirements. The conservation, Coterra did not even assess the marri tree that is going to be removed, the sole marri tree that is about to be removed in this project. In my assessment, the marri qualified as critical threatened black cockatoo habitat and was significant under WA and federal legislation. You have to consider the context of all the small pieces of vegetation and habitat left in the vines. And this is, the EPA will tell you this as loud as I'm telling you now. It was therefore not surprising for me that most government and other agencies the city referred the matter to replied with perfunctory answers that basically stated they had insufficient information to make an informed comment. So how could this scanty advice from government and other agencies possibly be interpreted by the City of Swan as justification or recommending to council that it should endorse the driving range development? I ask you. In my environmental assessment of the Vines, I found numerous values, environmental values that are covered by the statutory provisions. For instance, the Swan Vegetation Complex that covers the driving range is a very poorly reserved vegetation complex. Only 0.37% of the original extent of this vegetation complex is retained now. And the EPA treats these poorly reserved vegetation complexes seriously. Secondly, we found 3 threatened ecological communities listed as under the WA and or the EPBC Act. And
1 minute.
okay, all right, so those 2 woodlands, Eucalyptus gomphocephala tuart, and shrublands and woodlands of the new shade limestone. We found a new occurrence of the tuart, woodlands and forest TEC within the footprint of the driving range. And this is according to the federal definitions of that TEC. So you've got a very serious issue on your hands there. Okay, so my recommendation to my client was that it formally referred the currently proposed driving range to the WA Environmental Protection Authority under the provisions of the WA Environmental Protection Act. The reasons for this advice were the complexity of the environment, the many key environmental factors that the current proposal will impact, the need to assess the proposal in the context of the sensitive, highly threatened. Yes, I similarly propose to the City of Swan that they do not support the recommendation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Not quite, but I think that'll have to do.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted you to repeat about you talked about a vegetation complex that only had a certain percentage left. Could you just repeat that because I missed it?
Yes, well, the Golf Driving Range is intersects the Swan Vegetation Complex vegetation in the vines.
Yeah.
And this Swan Vegetation Complex was only 0.37% of that currently reserved in secure reserves. And this is way, way, way below the threshold of 10% that the EPA considers significant. So the EPA is going to immediately consider that this driving range is significant. And it needs assessing. There's complex environmental factors in there. There's Muche limestone, there's wetlands involved, there's ecological connectivity, there's effect on fauna, the effect of lights on the environment. It's recently been published by the Federal Department of Environment, and they published guidelines on that. And the floodlights are not going to go down well against those guidelines. And the vines is a very important environmental area, and it hasn't been studied before in the detail. And I've got too much detail, as usually, to actually educate you all at once. But I'm just saying to council that there are stiff penalties associated with breaching these environmental provisions, and it really warrants your careful attention. And that, as I said, the due diligence hasn't been done, and it needs to be done. And I recommend that the City of Swan refer the proposal to the EPA for assessment and to the Federal Department if the proponent wishes to still go ahead with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of? No. Thank you very much indeed for your.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rob Bradbury. I'm speaking on behalf of Lions Residents and Ratepayers Association.
Sorry, Robert, I had to do this here, but you're going to have to come up with.
I'll attempt to project. Please stop me if I'm not clear enough. Thank you. The plans within this development application represent a loss of amenity. It includes reduced access for some special needs users, as more than a dozen testimonials in front of you will demonstrate. It also causes the direct loss of one golf course hole and the subsequent closing down of 9 more. This represents a substantial loss of sporting facilities, in addition to the loss of large practice areas for pitching, putting and bunkers. This application is completely misaligned with the outline development plan for the Vines, as building a 2-storey concrete driving range to close down multiple holes and the green driving range does not meet the intent and character required in the structure plan. It also increases road traffic, it increases dangers to golfers and to other users of the resort, and it harms the environment. It is detrimental to the residential amenity of those living in homes who will be severely affected by the visual impact of a 20-metre high fence, light pollution and the additional noise. This is not in the public interest. The reason for this proposed concrete driving range is not to improve the golfing experience, but to replace the existing driving range with high-density over 55s housing. The owners of the resort made it clear in their initial 2021 vision statement. Furthermore, in December 22, a letter from the chairman informed members of the Vines that 9 holes would be closed and the current driving range was to be developed for high-density housing. The same organisation has subsequently quoted the Echo stating they have no development plans. The documents supplied in this application even refer to and map out these non-existent plans. To suggest this application is anything but the first step in a multi-application strategy to build housing all over this land is demonstrably ridiculous. The Vines Resort has a history of broken promises. 10 years ago, in 2013, Ray Jordan, the chairman of the Vines Golf and Country Club, promised to bring the course back to its former standard, to be a top 20 golf course resort, to become the home of tournament golf in WA. None of this has happened. Accordingly, we cannot afford to pretend to believe the claims this development is a singular one. The responsible authority report that has been presented to you also contains significant and material inaccuracies that invalidate the recommendation to approve. The report approves a 25% increase in operating hours over that in the traffic impact study. Can we seriously believe that a $5 million investment will be made without increasing the number of customers? The proposed practice area is far too small for safe pitching and is surrounded by pedestrian walkways. It's dangerous. I also note that in the report statutory implications, as Ms. Towers clearly pointed out, it fails to mention state and federal laws like the Biodiversity Act, the Environmental Protection Act, and the Federal Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. These are in place to protect us from exactly this kind of application. The environmental report provided glosses over critically endangered Chewett woodland under federal law. Chewett is deemed a threatened ecological community. Under this act, the law states that no disturbances of Chewett woodland is permitted within 30 metres of the edge of the canopy. This application proposes to prune back the canopy. It also proposes digging damaging holes 6 metres deep and 1.2 metres wide under that canopy. It's an absurd violation of the law and it beggars belief that the proposal recommendation is to approve. This information was provided by the VRA in response to the development application, yet it appears this was not included when contacting DWR, DVCA, or in the responsible authority report to you. It's no wonder that the DVCA, when provided only that information, responded with no comment. The area affected forms part of a fractured but viable and valuable woodland ecosystem. These corridors help link other remnant areas in public and private properties, helping to form an area large enough to support a long-term viable population of the trees, plants, and animals involved. As a community, we cannot allow this to be degraded any further to the point where it no longer functions, particularly when increasing tree canopy is a goal of the council. The VRA appeals to the standard of people affected by this application, residents, golfers, tourists, and visitors. Please do not let this first stage be approved. It does not stand upon its own merits, and furthermore, would open the way to an avalanche of economic loss, environmental destruction, and human danger. As our Planning Minister Rita Safiotti noted in a recent interview with the ABC, there is massive demand for playing fields and any outdoor sports. She also said we do not wish to see a reduction. We need to keep our active, open space, particularly for kids' sport. Removing holes from a golf course, thank you. Removing holes from a golf course goes against this. Reducing amenity and access for special needs groups goes against this. This highly public future plan that's being communicated plans to build over both the current green driving range and the golf course itself This will decimate a valuable sporting amenity and facility. The council also has an excellent long-term plan for increasing housing in the area. It's been in place since at least 2019. Both current and future residents of the City of Swan need access to sporting facilities and open space here in the Vines. Tonight we ask that you ensure two things come home to roost: the critically endangered cockatoos and critically endangered woodland, and accountability for broken promises and misleading reports from this company by rejecting the application. Thank you.
We had two written deputations, one from Mr. Gavin Troy and one from Mr. David Manor. Both of those are in your white sheets. And also those two written deputations will be made to for you to read. The next one we have 4.2, which is the responsible authority report to reference on to 154 lot 3 150 Coast Road Dayton and furthest.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and elected members. As has been mentioned, I'm simply here speaking in favour of the officer's recommendation to endorse the responsible authority report for the childcare in Dayton. We've worked fairly extensively with the officers. We've been through the design review panel twice, and we're really here just to answer any questions that you might have this evening in relation to the item, and really to seek your support for the officer's recommendation. There's really only one aspect that I would like to highlight. So in relation to our item, we're fully in support of the officer's recommendation. As I said, it's we've been through the design review process, and we've worked with the officers in relation to the recommended conditions, and we're here supporting the item. The only matter that I would note that there is an interrelated item that is on the agenda in relation to public art. We're comfortable making a public art contribution in accordance with the existing policy, but I do note that in relation to the public art item, there is a recommendation to change the threshold for a public art contribution to 2.5 million. Just noting that if that threshold did change, we would fall below the threshold, and therefore, when the item would come to council, it would be a question as to whether or not that condition would still be applicable. But as the item stands at the moment in relation to the officer's recommendation and the policies that do exist in council, we have no objections at all to what's put in front of you.
Councillor Bowman, you have a question?
First question, I noticed in the staff report, they indicated 2 parking bays extra. Are you going to take up the suggestion of removing those and adding more trees?
So we are looking at that at the moment. We are over in terms of the open space amounts, and we have made changes from the lodged application to increase the amount of vegetation. Whether or not it would be 2 bays, I'm not sure, but we have looked at probably dropping one of the bays in favour of additional vegetation.
And what about actually in the car parking bays as well, not many trees for shade, so will you be a heat sink?
Yeah.
That might be consideration that you look at, or?
No, absolutely. So in terms of the application as it was originally lodged, and then going through the design review panel, we have actually increased the amount of vegetation that we have included in the car park.
Are they the plans that we've got in the agenda? Because the plan I see in the agenda is a plain car park with no trees and then sold by vegetation where there are trees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, now you can see the recommendation and the condition says that the applicant should modify those plans to install 6 more trees as a minimum, and that may come as a consequence. So that recommendation works to require the council supports that recommendation, a further change to those plans.
So we did, if I may, through the chair respond, so we have also increased the setback to the fencing and increased the size of the tree wells to be able to increase the amount of vegetation that's actually sitting on the fence line to the car park as well.
the playground, the outside space, is right next to the road. How's that fence going to interact with the neighbourhood?
So we've got some solid fencing with some piers, and we've also got open style fencing so that there's an outlook over to the existing open space that's.
So how much of that solid fence is open?
Oh,
50%, less than 50%?
yeah, 50%. That's probably a bit more than 50%.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Just two things I'd like to ask. There doesn't appear to be a footpath around the building, and I presume people often with their children through childcare as well. So is there facilities for walking to?
So what we have done is actually imposed onto our plans the City of Swan proposals for the designs and the upgrades for Arthur Street and for Coast Road. So what's shown on the plan actually shows what those improvements are proposed for the actual Arthur Street. We've imposed the Arthur Street engineering design.
And my second question was the green area shown the outside outdoor play area. Is it artificial turf, astroturf that you're looking to put there, or what's the plan?
So at the moment, the final decision hasn't been made in terms of that, the internal play area. That will be an aspect that the operator will be having a look at, and it is something that needs to come back to the City of Swan with the final design and in accordance with the final conditions. But the decision hasn't been made at this stage.
Okay. But being on that, is there shade structure proposed to go over that outside?
Yes. Yes, so the shade sails hopefully have been included, but that's definitely the intent is to have shade sails.
Any other questions, Councillor Carolina?
What kind of trees were you going to be planting on the site?
So at the moment, as I said, the final landscape plan will come in finally in accordance with the City of Swan planting requirements within that space. So to be honest, I can't recall off the top of my head what the final was, but there is a landscape plan that's included.
How would you feel about modifying this motion or this particular item for narrow trees to be included in the planting instead of any other tree?
My only question would be if that's consistent with the City of Swan's own policy requirements for the landscape plan. So the landscape plan has been prepared in accordance with the city's planting policy. So
I was wondering what you talked about that if I was to modify it, if I was to amend this motion for the trees to be narrow.
all of the trees, or in particular locations, or
Perhaps not all, but maybe the ones particularly on the car park. Because, we're going to need fairly substantial trees on the car park. Or perhaps in other areas, but,
well, certainly in terms of the
is there some way that we can, I can contact you and perhaps email you about that?
I'd be comfortable putting that to the developer, but more so in terms of the area that we were looking at, that option for dropping the car parking, that had the potential probably for a more substantial shade tree. So
Okay, but I was thinking more than one. So, is there any way I can have a discussion with either yourself or the developer?
through the chair, we'd be comfortable, we're definitely open to having a look at that. And given that the conditions require us to come back with the landscape plan, I wouldn't see that as an issue for us.
So would you like to get in touch with me?
Through the, Mr Mayor, if that's appropriate, as part of this process, I'd probably just question our.
Carolina, I think it would be appropriate for Councillor Carolina in conjunction with yourself and the city officer.
Yeah, so if it's with the city officers and that's appropriate protocols, no issue at all. It's just unusual for us to meet and talk with elected members outside of having representation with the officers. But I don't have an objection to doing that.
Okay, Well, I'll speak to the I'll see if we can do something.
Sure.
Any other questions, councillors? No? Right, thank you very much, Nick. All those regarding deputation, I again apologise for the lack of sound. I just want you to know that tonight is not a decision-making forum, so no decisions will be made tonight. Looking for questions and answers and deputations and discussions, so thank you very much for your attendance. Part C, councillors, we have Neil, which is motion to begin with Neil. We'll move on to 6.3. Councillors, questions in regard to other items on the agenda. So, councillor, questions in regard to other items on the agenda, are there any? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Deputy Mayor, item item 6.2. Why does the city allow staff to provide a service or product? Second question is, was there a conflict of interest management plan in place? And third question, were the appropriate quoting process adhered to, the independent neutral person being involved overseeing the process?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to answer the question, specifying which particular transactions we're referring to in order to determine who the staff was. So we're happy to come back and provide that information.
There was a general question about when staff provide services. There's an example in this one. So do we allow staff to provide services to the city directly?
CEO.
Thank you. There are policies for staff regarding declaration of interest. The provision of service would have to be such that the service is provided.
Thanks very much.
In my personal experience, I've had staff provide services that it's not a frequent.
So the second part of that question was, in those situations, do we have a conflict of interest management plan?
Through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do, and there is a requirement for staff if they're seeking to undertake secondary employment to gain a secondary employment exemption as part and parcel of their employment.
This is not secondary employment, this is a direct service to the city. So my question was, is there a conflict of interest management plan in place? And part of that conflict of management plan would, I would believe, would have an independent person overseeing the actual purchasing.
Yeah, thank you. So I come back to my previous answer. As the city has a direct employment relationship with each of the staff, if it were to be employing someone for a secondary activity that's not related to their core employment, under normal expectations they would have sought secondary employment approval. I can't give you a definitive answer until I know the circumstances around it.
I'll give the specifics to the CEO. And,
Any other questions that relate to the agenda? No? All right, thank you. Councillors, we will now need to go to the confidential items, and I would then ask Valerie to